Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Dev Marketer channel. Now, by popular demand, I am doing a Laravel upgrade guide. We're going to be upgrading from Laravel 5.4 to 5.5. So we've already gone through and finished the entire series on Laravel 5.5 new features. That was a very successful series. It sounds like a lot of you guys appreciated that. But throughout the series, everyone wanted to know basically two things. Are we going to still do the advanced blog and CMS? Yes, we are. Don't worry about it. It'll come up soon. Second of all, everyone wanted to see an upgrade guide. We got lots of requests for upgrade guides. I had done an upgrade guide previously for the last version, and so I'm going to go ahead and do another one here, and it's going to work out really well because we're actually going to upgrade our advanced CMS project. That's currently a Laravel 5.4 project. We're going to upgrade that to 5.5, so it's going to work out really good because I need to upgrade that project anyway. So that's what we're going to do here today. Now, I'm not actually putting this in the series for the advanced blog and CMS. I'm going to keep it separate. But for any of you guys tuning in and you want to see that series, I will have a link to that playlist at the end of this video, and I will also have a link at the end of this video and obviously down in the description, to the Laravel 5.5 new features if you want to check out that series as well. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to be upgrading from 5.4 to 5.5. It's honestly a really easy upgrade. There's going to be two parts to this. Well, it's all going to be one video, but there's going to be two sections inside of this video, and I will have timestamps for every section in the description if you want to go through and skip to certain sections. The first section is going to be all the required elements, all the necessary stuff in order to do the upgrade. We're going to basically be following the upgrade guide that Laravel provides us at laravel.com. We're going to step through that. I've got my own upgrade guide that I've created for you guys here, and we're going to step through that step by step and make any of those changes. These are necessary changes to prevent our application from breaking. Now, the second part of this video, again, it's still part of this, it's in the same video, but it's just going to be the second half, is going to be the recommended changes that I've got. So these are changes that don't break your application, but we're going to basically go through the diff file on GitHub and add some changes to our code to make it mimic what a new Laravel 5.5 application would look like if we were to run a Laravel new command now. Okay, so that's going to be the second part. A lot of you may not be interested in that part. You just want to see the required elements. So I'm going to do that up here first. And then the second half will be those optional elements, which are not covered in the upgrade guide on Laravel.com. So we're going to kind of get two things done here. This is going to be a long video. I'm going through a whole bunch of features that most of you guys will probably not need. We're going to go through everything that you may need to change, but most of it we're actually not going to need to change for our application. I'm going to go through all of it anyway, just so that your guys' application are using some of these methods, you know to make the change and what to do. Okay, throughout this, we're gonna basically mark every change as either common, possible, or rare. You can see that here. So if an item is common, this is something that basically every single one of you guys is going to have to do no matter what. If it's possible, this means most of you guys will probably have to do this. It's a common enough element that I want to spend some time talking about it. And then rare, I'm going to try to skip over these elements, but I'm going to let you guys know that they exist. These are generally like overriding kind of deep methods inside of Laravel that most of you guys probably aren't doing, or if you are, you're only doing like one of these, you're probably not doing all of them. So I'm going to let you guys know that it exists, so it's a thorough upgrade guide, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I'll provide the examples, and you guys can download this upgrade guide. The link will be in the description. I'm not sure where it's going to download from, Dropbox or something probably. You can download a PDF of this guide here. So that's all of this. Again, take a look at timestamps if you want to skip around or whatever. The timestamps will be in the description as well. Let's dive into this and start upgrading. First things first, with the new version of Laravel 5.5, you need PHP 7.0 or higher. So in order to check that, you're going to want to pull up your terminal. You're going to want to run php-v in the terminal. I've gone ahead and done that before here, and you can see what it looks like for me. So php-v, you can see I am running version 7.0.9 of PHP, and at the time of this recording, that is not the most current, but it's pretty close. It's 7.1.8, I think, or 9 or something like that is the current version of PHP. So, but this is close enough. It's above 7.0.0, which is the important part. So go ahead and make that change, upgrade the version of your PHP. At this point, basically everything is using PHP 7, so it's a good time to finally upgrade if you haven't done that yet. Okay, another thing to do, and this actually came recommended by a lot of you guys, update Composer globally. So the Laravel new command, when we run a Laravel new command on a 5.5 project, the old Laravel installer doesn't work 100% correctly. You need to upgrade that installer. And a lot of you guys recommended this to me when I did, I don't remember when I did it, but it might have been like version or episode 1 of the Laravel 5.5 new features series. And a lot of you guys put this in the comments that I need to run Composer global update. And I actually did not know that, and it does fix the problem. So go ahead and run a Composer global update. You can just do this in your terminal. Run it once, click enter. That's going to update your Laravel installer among a few other things, whatever global installs you've added, and get everything up to date. I do not do this enough, so it's a good idea to get it done. I marked it as common because I think everyone should just go ahead and do it. It doesn't hurt anything to do it. Just make sure you got the most recent version of all your Composer packages, most specifically the Laravel installer one. Okay, now let's talk about the core nuts and bolts. This is actually how you do the core upgrade, is actually changing your Composer.json dependencies. I marked it common because you cannot upgrade without doing this. So we're going to be going into our Composer.json file and making a few changes to some of these packages to make sure that they are meeting the minimum requirements that we have. And then we also need to make a change here to our scripts to set up our package auto discovery. So we talked about package auto discovery in one of the videos in Laravel 5.5 new features. What enables it here is this post autoload dump. So we're going to go through and set that up here in just a second. In fact, right now, we're going to go through, we need to upgrade our Laravel framework to 5.5. We now have this new whoops error page. Remember talking about that in our new features. We need to pull this package in as well. Make sure to use version 2.0.0 or whatever's compatible with it. And then we also need to upgrade phpunit to use version 6 or whatever's compatible with it. So let's go through and make those changes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, open up our composer.json file. And inside of here, we're going to make a few of those changes. Okay, so of course, Laravel, let's change PHP version, of course, needs to be 7.0.0. And then we need to have the Laravel framework, needs to be 5.5 point star, or you can do greater than or equal than, or equal to 5.5, either one. Okay, then let's see. We obviously don't worry about this. This is a third-party package, so you may not have that one. But the rest of this should basically follow pretty similar to what you've got. phpunit needs to be upgraded to version 6.0. And then we're going to go ahead and add our whoops page. So let's go ahead and add that here. So it's going to be filp/whoops. And we're going to make it compatible with version 2.0. Just like that. Okay, so that's going to be all the necessary stuff for that. Make sure that whoops is inside of our require dev, and then make sure that Laravel framework is obviously inside of require. Okay, so with all that done, the last thing to do is change our scripts command. Now, several of these have changed. So obviously the post install and post update are gone. And then we just need to make a few changes here. We need to add an @ sign to each of these here. To these first two packages. And then down here, what we can do is we can run, let's go ahead and delete our post install command. And then for our post update command, we're going to change this to post autoload dump. All right, and then we can go through, we're going to call this method here composer scripts, but we're going to run the post autoload dump one. Just like that. All right, and then down here, instead of optimize, we're going to run our package discover. So PHP artisan, spelling that wrong, artisan package discover. Just like that. Okay. All right, perfect. So that's everything we need to get running with our composer.json. Now we can actually go through and run a composer update command. Of course, make sure you're inside of your project like this. Okay, so now we've gone ahead and ran that. Now, one thing I want to let you guys know, you should notice this working. At the end of your Composer update, you should now have PHP Artisan Package Discover. and it should discover at least Laravel Tinker. Okay, now I have another package here that is discovered Laratrust. That's a third-party package, but you probably won't have that. If you had a few other third-party packages, they might show up here as well. Okay, but you should see this discovered package, and that means that this command that we set up, this post auto dump, this script down here, is working correctly. Okay, so we're good. That's everything we actually need to do for now. Let's jump back over to our upgrade guide. Okay, so we've made all of those major changes. Now we're going to go through a few other changes. They're going to be less common, and these may not apply to all of you. Now, one thing that will apply to all of you is if you have any third-party packages, you're going to want to go to their appropriate GitHub pages, make sure that they are compatible with Laravel version 5.5. If they are not, you can go ahead and add an issue for the developer so that they're aware of it. You could help them yourself, submit a pull request to fix it, or you could fork it, whatever's needed. You guys could actually contribute. It's a good opportunity to contribute to the open source community and get these packages updated to 5.5 as quickly as possible. Now, once you know that all your third-party packages are compatible with 5.5, then you can move on. There are a few of these other ones that we're going to mention, which are first-party packages, and or second party, I guess you could kind of call some of them. We need to make sure they're updated as well. So Laravel Dusk, if you're using Laravel Dusk, the previous version used version 1.0. We are now using version 2.0. So in your Composer.json file, just make that tweak to update it to version 2.0 and then run Composer update again. If you're using Pusher for event broadcasting, there is a new version of the Pusher SDK, version 3.0, that you want to pull in. So once again, go down to your Composer.json file and update that to version 3.0 and then run Composer update. Also, if you're explicitly pulling in Swift Mailer, then you will want to also call in version 6.0 of that. Now, Laravel itself does use Swift Mailer as a dependency of the framework, but if you're calling in and you don't need to worry about it unless you're calling it in explicitly, then go ahead and update the version. Run Composer update again as well, just to make sure. Okay, so that's basically all of the packages. We should be done with our Composer.json file for quite some time. Now let's go through, we'll talk about a few of these, and again, not all of these will apply to everyone. So you basically just want to listen to kind of what the changes are. If you're not messing with any of these methods that I'm talking about, then you don't have to worry about it, right? You can just move on. But if one of your applications does use these methods I'm talking about, then you're going to want to listen up and see how you need to change it. So for Artisan Commands, if you're writing any custom Artisan Commands that use the fire method, which is going to be pretty common, that fire method is now renamed to handle. So wherever you reference fire, you want to rename that and reference handle. Also, as you notice, we got rid of a PHP artisan optimize command in our scripts. The optimize method is now gone. So you no longer need the optimize command thanks to basically being upgraded to version to PHP 7. We no longer need this optimize method, so it has been basically removed from the framework. Now in version 5.5, although it's basically functionality been removed, they've kept it there as an empty function. This way, if you accidentally leave an optimize method call in there and you call it, it's not going to break your application, okay? But it's also not going to do anything. So go through your application anywhere that you used PHP Artisan optimized and go ahead and just remove it. It hasn't been renamed or replaced. It's literally just gone. You don't need it anymore. As a quick little thing just to keep in mind, in version 5.5, optimize exists, but it's an empty method, so nothing really happens. Nothing happens at all. In version 5.6 of Laravel, they've already started accepting commits for it. And in version 5.6, which is not going to be released for some time, but version 5.6 will not have optimize at all. So at that point, it will break your application. So go ahead and just get used to not using it. You don't need it anymore. Go ahead and remove it. That's it for Artisan Commands. Now for authorization. If you are using authorization, these two methods, at least in authorizations, are pretty rare. So I marked them rare because I don't think it's going to apply to too many of you guys. But if you are overriding the authorize resource method, just keep in mind that if you have a multi-word model name, it's going to be, the result of this is going to come back in snake case. You know, the multi-word model name will come back as snake case. So just be prepared for that if you're using this method. Also, the before policy method, this will not be called if the class doesn't contain a method with the name matching the name of the ability being checked. Okay, so if you're trying to call, a name that doesn't exist, it's not going to call that. Now for the cache driver, this is common. I want you guys all to know about this. It's a good idea to do anyway. The database driver, if you're using the database driver for your cache, you need to make sure that after you deploy your application for the first time in Laravel 5.5, go ahead and refresh your cache. You can run PHP Artisan cache clear to go ahead and clear that cache. I recommend doing this anyway since you got a new code base. Go ahead, just refresh the cache anyway. I think it's a good idea. Okay, so that's a pretty common one. I recommend everyone do that one. Now, we're going to go through a whole bunch of Eloquent ones, so buckle your seatbelt for these. There's a whole bunch of Eloquent stuff to change. Now, these first couple are pretty rare. I don't think they're going to apply to too many of you, but if you are overriding the belongs to many method, keep in mind when I say this, this is like you're actually overriding the method. You're not using the method. If you're just calling, you're setting up a relationship for belongs to many, you don't need to worry about this. This is only if you're overriding the method, which not very many of you are. If you're overriding the belongs to many method, you just need to make sure that you update this method signature. So there's some different arguments here that weren't in here before, and make sure it matches these. I'm not sure which ones there are, but a few of these are different than they were before. I personally have never overridden the belongs to many method, so I'm not familiar with the exact argument list that was in the old versions, because I've never had to deal with that, but it is different, so make sure it matches. This is what it should look like now if you're overriding that method. Now, if you're overriding the is method, then once again, a small minor change to the signature here. In the old versions of Laravel 5, Laravel 5.4 and earlier, the is accepted an argument for model, and it was type hinted to be a model. And it's no longer type hinted because now it can receive null as an argument, so it can't be type hinted. So go ahead and remove the type hinting so it just accepts this model variable, and it may come in as null. And so be prepared for that if you're overriding it. Just know that it might come in as a null value and be prepared to accept that. All right. So now, both those were rare. This one's possible. This one's actually kind of common, almost between common and possible. If you're using events, you definitely are going to run into this problem. So the events property now inside of your model has been renamed. It's no longer events. It's now called dispatches events. So anywhere that you have set up events to be dispatched inside of your model, you've obviously got your events property set up. You need to rename that property to be dispatches events because that's what Laravel's looking for now. Now, the reason for this change is to allow users, there were a lot of users that were defining a relationship called events that was causing errors and confusion because it's a common use case for, if you really think about it, having a relationship called events. There's a lot of use cases I can think of where you would use it. I've personally ran into it once or twice where I've wanted to call it events and then discovered it's a reserved word because of this events property. So I cannot use it. It causes a problem. So like when I was setting it up, it was a ticketing system. And so we had venues, and then different venues had obviously events that were attributed to those venues. So there was like a one-to-many relationship, many events to one venue. And so if you wanted to define an events relationship, you couldn't do it because events is already a reserved property for this events to dispatch events. So now you can actually do that though because they've renamed it to dispatches events to make it a little more unique so you're not as likely to run into that problem. So kind of a fun fact there. All right, now the parent property, same thing as this. Basically, if you were previously calling the parent property while setting up a pivot table, that now has been renamed to pivot parent, just again to make it a little more unique. I think that's really good. I like those changes. Those changes are pretty good. All right, now this one's pretty rare. I doubt very many of you guys at all are going to be affected by this, but I'll mention it. If you are overriding the create method inside of the belongs to many, has one or many, or morphs one to many classes, then you will need to set a default value for this attributes. This attributes should now equal an empty array. Again, this is only if you're overriding the create method inside of these other methods. Not very many of you guys are doing that, I don't think. All right, Eloquent. This one is possible and maybe even common. If you're using the with count method on your models to get the count of a certain column, by default, it used to append the underscore count to the name that you were creating. So here we've got user with count foo as bar. It would basically create a property inside of this users object called bar underscore count. and that would represent the count that you were trying to create. So it automatically added that underscore count to what you were setting. Now that is no longer the case. It actually accepts exactly what you give it here. So if you give it bar, the property that has the count will actually be bar. So if you want to retain the old functionality, that underscore count, you just need to go ahead and define it here directly. So you can see here foo as bar underscore count. That will get you the exact same results. So if you're using any of these with count methods, it's probably easier to just go into your model and just add the underscore count to any of these names instead of going through everywhere that you reference it in your views or your controllers. This will be easier. So just make sure that way you can keep using that same method property name that you were using before. It'll just retain that. So now it'll be called bar underscore count. All right. So that one's I think a lot of you guys will probably use that one. Okay. Now just this one I put as possible. I don't know, 50% of you guys, maybe a little bit less, will come into problems with this. Just keep in mind that the way exceptions are handled now, not really the way they're handled, but the format of the resulting JSON validation errors is different. So this is the new format. You receive the message up here at the top, and then you have an array of all the different errors down below. Okay, so this is the new format. If you want to retain the old format, let's say you're parsing through these exceptions or something, so you don't want to rewrite that parser, you want to retain the old format, then this is how you're going to do it. So you can retain it by going into your app exceptions handler and adding this protected function here for invalid JSON and then return this right here. You're going to want to go through and copy that. This will retain the old functionality of the exception JSON, but just get used to using this new one unless you're already parsing through this for some reason and need that old functionality and aren't ready to change it. Okay, files. If you're using the files method, pretty easy here, but there is a new, you need to add this hidden argument that we see here, defaults to false. This is just a new attribute inside the signature for files. So if you're overriding that, just go ahead and keep that in mind. Now for mail, we've got some similar stuff. If you're overriding the queue or the later, then you're going to want to, not really overriding it, but if you've set up a mail and you've set up these queue or later classes, you're going to want to go through and get rid of the data and the callback arguments that used to be in here. So those are no longer used. This is what it should look like. So your queue just accepts your view and your queue, and then the later accepts delay, view, and queue. All right. So that's all you need. You don't need data or callback anymore. Now let's talk about queues. So this is pretty common. If you guys are using queues, you will definitely have this problem. So if the old dispatch helper is now been renamed to dispatch now. Okay, so anywhere where you call the dispatch helper, you need to rename that dispatch underscore now, or you can use the facade, which is bus dispatch. You can see some examples here. So if you were calling it, instead of just calling dispatch and then your new job, you would do dispatch now or just do the facade. Pretty easy, but you're gonna need to go through anywhere that you dispatch a queue. That's how you're going to change it. All right, now for requests. This one's pretty rare, but if you're overriding the all method for your request, then you also need to update this menu signature to accept this new keys argument. All right, so you're gonna need to add that in here. That's only if you're overriding this method. All right, these ones are gonna be pretty common. So I'm gonna go ahead and spend a little time explaining this because this is a little confusing, I think, at first. But the way that the has method and the only method works are a little different now. So this is where we talk about, I think a lot of people use this, almost everybody. That's why I marked it common. If you think about request has and then request only, these are things that we definitely use. They've changed a little bit. So the way that request has used to work is that it used to respond back with either true or false. True if the request had a value passed in, if an input was passed into the request and it was a truthy value, then it would return true. If an input was passed into the request and it was a faulty value, or if no input was passed in at all, then it would return false. Okay, so now it works a little different. Now it basically tells you whether or not an input was passed into the request at all. So if an input was passed into the request, even if it's empty or it's null, it still is going to return true because that input was passed into the request. Okay, so now you're going to want to think about request has a little differently. Request has literally tells you that, like, we used to use it basically as like a is, like kind of like to see if it's set, like is set. So you can see if it doesn't exist or if it's just kind of a, a pointless value like an empty string or null. That's how we used to use request has. Now it's a little different. Now it literally tells you whether the value was passed in at all. A lot of times if you have a form for like their name and they leave it empty, it still gets passed into the request. It just gets passed in as an empty string because they left it blank. Okay, so now with the new request has, that's going to return true. And in the old one, it would return false, okay, if they left a field blank. So now if you want to check and you want it to work the way that the old request has worked, you want to use this new method called request filled. So request filled is basically checking that not only it works the way the old one worked, which is not only was it filled in, not only was it passed in, but it also has a value, okay? So that's what request filled works. So depending on how you're using request has, you may need to make some changes in here. I don't know why that's kind of confusing to explain, but hopefully I did a good job explaining it. All right, so now the only method works similarly, basically. The only method, if you use the only method and call in a value or two, then it's going to, it's only going to pass in that return that value if it was set. All right, now the way it used to work is it would always return that value. It would just set it to null. But now it'll just won't return that value at all, okay? So if you want it to work the way it used to work, where it returns null, but it returns the value, then you want to use the all method. So you do request all and then pass in your value, and then it would, if it doesn't exist, it would return null. If you do request only and pass in the value, you're not going to get anything back. Okay, so just keep that in mind with requests. Those are two pretty common use cases, and you may need to go back through your application and change them. Luckily, I don't know. I'm going to have to sort through my source code. We actually might have used it now that I think about it. I actually think we have used the request has. I need to make sure we're using it appropriately in 5.5. All right. Now, if you are using the request intersect method, I don't think very many people use this. I think they got rid of this to keep, because it was confusing with the intersect method for collections. But anyway, if you were using the old request intersect method, that's gone now. So you need to change it. This is how you can get the same functionality. You can run it through an array filter, do request only, grab the value, and then run it through an array filter. That'll get you the same thing as intersect. Last but not least, request helper. Just one thing to keep in mind when you're using the helper. If you were grabbing nested keys before, you can no longer do that with the helper. In order to grab nested keys, you need to call input. So you do request input, and then you can use dot syntax to get the nested keys. It no longer works with the helper method anymore. That's something that might affect some of you. All right, now if you're setting up any testing at all, these are definitely going to affect you. The authentication assertions have changed their names significantly. Okay, so these are some of the new names. They basically changed this to keep it a little more consistent. So you can see they all start with assert instead of like see and don't see. So I really like these changes. I think they're good. But see is authenticated is now assert authenticated. Don't see is authenticated is assert guessed. I think it makes a lot more sense. You guys can read these. I'm not going to read all of them right now. You guys can see them here. Now, last thing is with testing is now there's a new method called assert queued. So the way that when you checked email before sending mail, if you were queuing a mail, it would trigger the assert sent. Okay, so just queuing an email was considered sent as far as testing is concerned. Now it has two different methods. So queuing an email is no longer going to trigger the assert sent. It's no longer going to be considered a sent email until it's actually sent. And now you can check to see if it was queued using this new assert queued. So if you want to check both, you need to call two different things. But just keep that in mind. It's going to be good to know that now when you're queuing, it's no longer the same as sending an email. It's now considered two different things from testing. All right, now this one I marked possible because I think we've got a very worldwide audience. I think a lot of people use translation. Wherever you basically use or import this interface, this loader interface for translation, it now has changed and moved. So now you need to any reference to this Illuminate translation loader interface needs to go under contracts, basically. Illuminate contracts translation loader. Okay? Just need to swap that out. All right, now validation. All of the validations validate methods are public instead of protected. And then last but not least, the views. So this one is, I actually teach this way, the dynamic with variable names. This is how I like to pass variables into views. If you are using this, just keep in mind that it now automatically uses camel case. Okay, so here you can see with maximum votes, the M is capitalized. When it actually gets passed into the variable, it's going to be camel case like this. It's going to be lowercase for the first one. Every additional word will be uppercase, okay? So that's how this is going to work. All right, that's it for everything. So that's all the required changes. Now we're going to go through and look at the recommended changes. So everything we did up to this point are changes you need to make in order to prevent the application from breaking. But as long as you do everything we've done up to this point, your application is a Laravel 5.5 application. You're good to go. Good job. All right, so you can go ahead, you can finish this video, you can go about your business and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. All right, now if you want to follow along, I'm going to go through the GitHub diff files and we're going to make a few changes to our application. We're going to be working with the advanced CMS project and be adding some code there. So if you guys want to keep watching, you can watch me go through that. Otherwise, we've basically covered all the necessary things, but I'm just going to be adding a few other things that I wanted to do to keep it more in line with a brand new Laravel 5.5 application. You'll see as we go through it, if you want to watch for a little bit, you'll see kind of the stuff that I'm talking about. None of these changes will break your application if you didn't do them, but they're good kind of changes to have and nice kind of updates to have to make it feel more like that Laravel 5.5 application. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I will link this in the description so you guys can check it out. This is the diff file for our project, okay? So what we're going to go through here, we're going to see basically any of these changes and we're going to add any that we feel are appropriate. Okay, so you can see here that the gitignore was changed. I'm not too worried about the gitignore file, so we're going to skip over that. And what I've set up here, by the way, this changes the base 5.4 project to, it's comparing it to the current master 5.5. That's what's happening here, and I've created a split view. This link that's going to be in the description will set this up for you. See, this is the version 5.4, this is version 5.5. Okay, so let's move on down. Let's take a look at this. We don't need to worry about the changelog. I'm not too worried about keeping that in sync. Now this one is important. The auto loading, as we talked about one of our features for Laravel 5.5, the auto loading of the Artisan Commands requires this to be installed. So inside of our PHP Artisan kernel, we need to add this line in here to go ahead and register that. So app. Okay, so down here, what we're gonna do, we're just gonna say this load directory, just like that. Okay, there we go. That's gonna be good. Okay, now inside of our exceptions handler, we have a few other little things here. You can see that this don't report is now empty by default, so they get rid of all of these. We also get rid of the authentication exception since it's no longer needed, since we're not calling it here. And then we also have this new protected property called don't flash. These are the properties that we do not want to flash no matter what. Okay, so let's go through and remove these. So let's go to our app exceptions handler. App exceptions handler, and we're going to get rid of all of these. We can get rid of this, and then for all right, we have another property here that we actually haven't set up yet that was called don't flash. Okay, we can actually grab all these. Okay, so now that we got that done, let's take a look down here. So it looks like we can also convert any authentication exception into an unauthenticated response. It looks like we can just remove that whole section. So this whole section here can just be removed. There we go. There we go, we cleaned up that file. Now moving on, let's see our login controller. We can get rid of, we can just use this new accept. Let's go into our login controller. It's already set up that way. Okay, and then let's see, return. By the way, so some of these changes have already been changed for me because this is like version 5.4.25 or something. This was right before it changed to 5.5. So some of these changes have already been made for me. Okay, so let's see here. Auth register controller. This doesn't really need to be changed. That's just a comment. All right, so looks like a typo. They meant to add the type as app user anyway. That's not super important for me. I'm just taking a look here at the changes. Okay, so you're setting it up as a middleware. This becomes a middleware now. Okay, so let's go up there to middleware, encrypt cookies. Oh, this isn't really that important. It just has to do with the name. Okay, that's not too important. We can go ahead and change it though. Doesn't really make a difference though. All right. Okay, great. All right, so verify CSRF token. Again, this change is pretty minor. We could make it if we wanted. So verify CSRF tokens. This is more of like a styling thing. Doesn't really make an effect. It's just because I think they must have wanted to keep this naming consistent, but it doesn't actually affect the end application. All right, Artisan. They want to add this define Laravel start microtime true. Artisan command. Okay, so we can go ahead and do this. Okay, so I'm just kind of looking at this, and I don't really know if this matters. This is a minor refactoring. I'm not going to worry about this one. So this define Laravel start and this require vendor autoload. Basically, these two lines already exist inside of this Bootstrap autoload.php. So there's nothing really different going on here. So I'm just going to leave it alone, leave it the way it is. It's just basically two ways to do the same thing. You're basically pulling in what's in this file directly into this Artisan file. So I'm not too worried about that. We're going to skip over that command. There's nothing really major that needs to be done there. Okay, Bootstrap /autoload. It looks like, oh yeah, they completely removed it because they pulled both of these into here. So that's what I suspected. They decided this Bootstrap autoload file is not important. Okay, great. So we don't need to worry about that either. Composer.json. Let's see. We've already made this change. We made that change. We made that change. We made that change. We made that change. We have these class maps, database/seeds and database/factories. We can make this change here. Let's go to composer.json, class map, their auto load. It's interesting that, oh, this is auto loading the entire database folder. The way they're doing it now is they're doing only the seeds and the factory subfolders. I see, because they didn't want to. Oh, so they don't have to, there's no point in doing migrations. I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's very minor, not super important, but just some more refactoring, I guess. Okay, so the way this was is before we imported, we auto-loaded the entire database folder, when in reality, we really only need to auto-load factories and seeds, not migrations. So this way, I guess it just doesn't auto-load the migrations. Makes sense, I guess. Pretty minor change, though. Okay. Doesn't really make a difference other than anyway, people will argue that it makes a difference because you're not, I guess, loading your migration files, but it's not going to be a major difference. Okay, so now for Laravel, you've got your don't discover. Let's go ahead and set this up just because, let's see, it's under extra. Do we have an extra? We don't have an extra, I don't think. We don't. Okay, so what this does, this now allows us to put in packages that we do not want to auto-discover. So By default, every package will get auto-discovered if it has that functionality built into the new packages. If we don't want to auto-discover a package, we now can do it like this. Once again, the reason these are recommended changes and not required changes is because if you hadn't added this in here, your application is going to work just like normal. Hey, while I was editing this video, I noticed that there's actually a typo here, and I went back to the source code and realized I hadn't fixed it yet. So on line 57 that you can see right here, since I've paused the video, on line 57 there's an extra comma. Go ahead and remove that comma just so that you don't have problems next time you run Composer update or Composer install or something like that. It'll actually boot even with the comma there, but you'll just have problems when you run Composer. So go ahead and fix that. I just noticed that while I was watching the video here to get ready to upload to YouTube, and thought I'd chime in here and mention that so it doesn't cause any confusion for you guys. All right, carry on. But again, a new 5.5 package would include this. Now you're noticing how a lot of these, like once again, changing this, your old app, the way it was before, still continues to work. Okay, so that's why it wasn't a required change. This just keeps it in line with Laravel 5.5, which is optimized, to not pull in that migrations folder. Where we got rid of the Bootstrap /autoload.php. Again, just minor changes, but it's not going to break the application if you didn't do it. That's why I kept all of these inside of the recommended sections. I've already done this. We actually did this in the required section. We added these. So that's actually already good. We've already done this as well. Let's see, inside of our config/app, we got rid of the Laravel tinker. So this is because it's automatically auto-discovered. So we don't need Laravel/tinker. So we can get rid of that inside of our app file. So config/app, let's go and just kind of close these up. So config/app, this is where we used to, actually import all of our projects, all of our providers. And so now it's saying that we don't need to import this package provider because it will automatically be pulled in through the discovery. So that's why we don't need it there anymore. So we can get rid of that. Again, if you kept it in there, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't break your application though. Okay, so now we've got a few other changes here to cache. This just helps you. This customizes the name of the cache by default. So if we go over here to config/cache, you'll see that the old one, our cache was always just called Laravel, and you could obviously change it by going into this config file. This is automatically going to name it based on what you set the value of your app name. So inside of your env file, whatever you set the app name to, let's say you name it devmarketer, that would be the name of the application. Well, now it's going to name our cache will be devmarketer_cache. That's what this is doing here, whereas it used to just name it Laravel. So it just kind of customizes it by default. So kind of cool. Let's go ahead and set this up. So inside of our cache, we're going to, here it is. We're going to replace this with this. Okay, so we can set in our environmental file, we can set a cache prefix if we want, or it'll build it for us if this doesn't exist. Then it will go through and build it based on the app name, and then it'll add the _cache at the end. And you'll see that we do the same thing here with cookies in a second. We do the same thing to create cookie names. Okay, config database. If you're using SQL Server, which I am not, there's a few new attributes in here to keep it up to date with the newest drivers. I'm not going to worry about that because I do not use SQL Server, nor do I have a license, and I don't really have any intention of using it anytime soon. Okay, config/filesystems. This looks like it just sets our up. Okay, so by default, it used to just configure S3 and local. Now it sets it up based on some environmental file settings. So now we can use filesystem_driver in our environmental file and filesystem_cloud. I actually kind of like that. I'm going to go through and make that change. Let's see, file systems, and it's already been changed. Nice, sweet. Okay, so now basically it works the same way as it did before, but if I wanted to override it, it's gone ahead and set up an environmental file I could use but if I don't set it, then it just defaults to what it was before. Cool, let's do that. Great. So now Session. So they used to always be called Laravel Session. Now it does the same thing. It renames our session based on our app name, or we can set it based in session_cookie in our environmental file. Really good change. Let's make that again. We're session. I think it's at the bottom. Cookie. There it is, cookie. All right, paste. There we go. And now app name _session. That'll be cool. All right, so let's see what's next. Oh, in this session, we have the same thing. Same site cookies. This option determines how cookies behave. Oh, okay. So there's a new setting in there. Let's go ahead and get that. So we'll just add it here at the bottom. Okay, so there we go. Now we have that property. Oh, shoot. There we go. Okay, so this one is another, this is inside of our model factory. This is a minor refactor, basically. Some of these changes, I don't even know why they bother. I don't know. It's probably some nitpicky guy that's like, I don't know, you need to import it. So basically, they used to have it explicitly defined here, faker/generator. Then someone came through, probably a stickler, and wanted like, well, let's import it at the top, faker/generator, import it as faker, and then use just faker down here. I'm not sure which is better, personally. I feel like this is actually probably better, but I don't know. Whatever. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to lose sleep over that. I'm sure some people will. Okay, package.json. So there is a few changes in here. Nothing major, but we there are a few version changes that we want to make. So we can go through and change those, keep Axios up to date, and cross env. Got a significant change. And then, of course, Laravel Mix. We're now using Laravel Mix version 1.0. So let's go ahead and bring those in. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So this is going to be inside of our package.json for our node dependencies. Let's see, we're using Axios 16.2. Let's do that, 16.2. Cross env, we are using 5.0.1. 5.0.1. We've already removed, earlier when we were working on this project, we got rid of Bootstrap Sass, so that's not here anymore. jQuery, I think we got rid of jQuery. No, we still have that. Although I think I'm going to get rid of jQuery at some point. Laravel Mix, we've got version 1. Let's go ahead and do that. Version compatible with version 1. So, there we go. Lodash, same's the same, 4.17, 4, 2.1.10. Okay, that's all the same. Perfect. Okay, now since we don't need to worry about this, this is in PHP unit, so if you're making changes, I'm not going to worry about any of this. Because I kept Bootstrap /autoload. They had to change it here because they got rid of that file. So I'm not going to need to make any changes there. htaccess, I don't use, what changes this anyway? But anyway, let's see, rewrite rule. Yeah, so anyway, this is just a minor change if you're using Apache as your server. We can go ahead and set it, I guess. Let's grab this real quick. I'm trying to copy the whole file. Let's go to our htaccess. Do I even have it? That makes sense. Okay, let's go just paste it here. There we go. Just in case, I don't know. I don't use Apache anymore. I'm all in the Nginx. I'm all in on Nginx. Nginx is so fast and so easy to like. I love Nginx. I love it. I've done the Apache thing, guys, and Apache, you know, that was good back in the day, but I'm all on the Nginx train. Like, Nginx is so freaking fast, so easy to customize. Nginx is awesome. I don't even think about Apache. It's dead to me. All right. So, okay, moving on. What else do we got? I think we're at the end of the file here, guys. Okay, we did our Apache htaccess file. We have our index file. We don't need to worry about that because we're not... Oh, wait, we are using this. This is index. This is the public file. Okay, so we don't need to change that. We're good. We don't need to change that because, again, we kept this file. Okay, perfect. The reason that they had to add this is because they got rid of this file. So we don't need to worry about it. And then the README file we don't need to worry about. App.js, window.view equals require view. I think we already have that. I don't think we need to worry about our app.js. Let's go look at it real quick. Our app.js file is pretty good. Window.view, we already have that. We've already customized it. We don't need to worry about that. Okay, then we've got our import URL. They're using the new format. Okay, great, good for them. Then they're using, those are just some minor refactoring. I'm not too concerned about that. Language validations. They've just changed the naming of IPv4 and v6. We can go ahead and change that. Let's go ahead and add those. So that's in resources, language, English for me, validation, and IP. Wait, we passed it. IP right here. Oh, we already have that. Okay, good. And then welcome. We don't need to worry about the welcome page. Okay, so let's go ahead and just change this. So example test under feature. Let's clean this up again. So tests, let's clean, there we go. Tests, feature, example test. Basically, they got rid of all of these and they just added that. If I remember right, yep. And then they did the same thing here, refresh database under unit as well. So they got rid of those and just did that. Perfect. And then last but not least, inside of webpack.js, we basically set this up as, instead of a constant, well, okay, so they're just changing the very, very minor. Okay, let's change it. Oh, we already have the change. Okay, good. Sweet. We are done. We are good to go. We haven't saved this session file. Let's save it. Perfect. Bam, guys. We're done. All right, so there we go. We have upgraded from Laravel 5.4 to 5.5. So now our advanced blog and CMS project, the future home of the Dev Marketer website, which will be done, you know, sometime in the next couple years, is now Laravel version 5.5. So the goal is to finish this project before we have to upgrade it again to 5.6. That's my goal. It's going to set for myself. I really don't think it'll be a problem, but I'm just kind of joking because I know it's been dragging on forever. But anyway, hopefully you guys found that useful. If you guys stayed in touch this entire time, you guys watched all the way to the end, good job. This was a long video, but hopefully I made your upgrade process just a little bit smoother. Through those recommended parts, I kind of wanted to explain what was going on because, again, not all of it was necessary, but I did want to make our project mimic as close to a new Laravel 5.5 project as possible. So I wanted to go through all those changes with you guys. And I think between the Laravel 5.5 new features series and then going through this and going through the diff on GitHub, I think you guys have a good sense of what changed in Laravel 5.5. So I think you guys are well equipped to go out and do your own projects and to upgrade, obviously, and do everything else. You guys are going to be experts here. So good job. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Thanks so much for staying tuned. I don't need to tell you guys to subscribe because if you watch this long, then you guys are certainly subscribers. So thanks so much for sticking in there that long, and I will see you guys in the next video.